Ready for question number 2 now. Once again, Mrs. Helt, we begin with you. With the current COVID-19 pandemic and climbing numbers recently of the coronavirus cases in Deschutes County, do you think children should go back to school? Why or why not?
I absolutely do think that children should be engaged in schools. Being an 8-year member on the Bend Pine Schools Board, I know that education is the great equalizer, and we need to make sure that our children, poor or wealthy, have access to an education. And right now we have a crisis of equity. We are leaving behind our children of poverty. We are leaving behind our children that have disabilities. We're leaving behind our children of color and our minority children at greater proportions. And if we can, I reject the idea that we have to have safety or school. I think that there is a way to find school safely. And what is happening right now is this sledgehammer is just going to equity. And so I believe that our school board can find a way. Dr. Fauci even said today that there is, with all of the research that has been happening over the last 9 months, he believes there is a way to have local people with local control find safety. So I believe that we can find a safe way to find schools and connect our children. Our K through 3 children are learning to read. They can't learn to read on an iPad. That's never was the intention. Our teachers are doing a phenomenal job. They are working so hard to make sure that they are doing the best they can, but they really need to be reunited in a safe way. We can find a safe way to put our kids back in school and find equity for everyone. Schools shouldn't be just for children of means. They should be for everyone. And we can do that. And our school board has a plan, and I believe we should give control back over to our school board and our public health department with Dr. Conway to make sure that they can work together and make sure our kids can engage with each other in a safe, socially distanced, mask-wearing way.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Kropf, same question. With the current COVID-19 pandemic and climbing numbers of coronavirus cases in Deschutes County recently, do you think children should go back to school? Why or why not?
Yeah, I want our kids to be back in school. I have a 3rd grade daughter, and I know that distance learning is not the best thing for her or for other kids in our community. You know, the governor's office set metrics for what would be safe for kids to go back to school. I want our kids back in school, but more importantly, I want it to be safe. I want my daughter to be safe. I want the other kids in her schools and throughout our schools to be safe, and I want our educators to be safe and healthy. You know, we've learned right now, if you don't have your health, what else really matters? So we were below those metrics, and we've had an uptick the last several weeks that have pushed back our time for getting our kids back in school. I appreciate that the governor's office is taking a new look at those metrics to follow the science, to figure out what infection rates in our community are acceptable to allow our kids to go back to school. We all have a personal responsibility to be safe, to social distance, to wear a mask, to lower that infection rate. I am very concerned about equity issues within our schools. That's why I was so disappointed when Representative Helt voted against the Student Success Act last session when she was in the House of Representatives. That was a funding measure to turn the tide on 3 decades of underinvestment in our schools. It was a funding measure to lower class sizes, to put more nurses and counselors in our schools, to have more career and technical education. And the thing I really liked about it was dedicated grant funding to our schools to help those students that are most struggling. 1 out of 5 kids in Oregon doesn't graduate high school. That is unacceptable. That is not something that we can allow to happen. The Student Success Act was targeted funding to allow local school districts the tools they need to help those most struggling kids. I support it. The teachers of the state support it, who support me. I just couldn't believe when Representative Helt voted against that.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Sherry Helt, now you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
I would like to talk about school funding. School funding is really important. It's also important to not be prescriptive. And right now in a pandemic, there's a lesson to be learned. The CAT tax funding has been put on hold for our schools because it was so prescriptive, it wouldn't help our schools right now. So what we've done as a legislative body is brought forward the amount of money that would have been put forward into this tax and brought it forward in a way that schools are allowed to use it. I've also voted for the largest budget, $9 billion
All right, thank you
for
very
our
much,
education.
Mrs. Helt. Rebuttal number 2 to Jason Kropf, 30 seconds.
Representative Helt, I've heard you talk about how you voted for that budget, and that is true. You didn't vote for the funding measure. You voted for the budget, but not the funding measure. So you're coming before us today and saying, look, I signed off on this check, but you refuse to put any money in the bank to cover that check. That's not the way small businesses work. That's not the way we fund our schools, and that's not the way our government works. We need real school funding to make sure our school system works for all of our kids.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kropf. We're ready for question number 3 now. And once again, it's related to the coronavirus pandemic. Mrs. Helt, your question is, adding on to this coronavirus pandemic now, what would you do to help struggling businesses in Bend? We did education, now we do business. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Struggling businesses, we need to make sure we are taking away taxes and fees and regulations that would hurt small businesses. We need to make sure that our policies are not cumbersome and not hurting small businesses. Small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy here. We have 6,900 small businesses in Bend alone that have employees. We need to make sure that they can pay their rent, make sure they can pay their employees and their benefits. And for me, I would bring forward I would bring forward laws to make sure that their payroll tax can be cut and if they're keeping people employed. I think this is really important. I've also supported bringing forward grants that we've brought forward as a state. The Chamber of Commerce is allocating some of those funds currently. And I believe that we have to support our small businesses in every way that we can. Now, my opponent wants to vote for the cat tax, which would hurt small businesses, which taxes every item, which hurts people that are on paycheck to paycheck. I understand what it's like to be paycheck to paycheck. I understand what it's like to fight for your income. My opponent has a $115,000 salary that is secured by the government. And that is a whole different approach. The cap and trade policy that he wants would bring up costs of everything in Bend. I think we need to be mindful of our cost of living. This is not a time to bring forward taxing and fees that will increase the already increased costs that Bend is facing. Since I've been living here in 2004, it has become so much more expensive, and our families and businesses deserve less regulations and less taxing.
All right, Mrs. Helt, thank you very much. Same question to you, Mr. Kropf. What would you do to help struggling businesses in Bend?
Right. So small businesses are the absolute backbone and engine of our economy, both here locally and throughout the state. We need to do all we can to support those. You know, we had a revenue forecast that was better than expected recently, and what we learned from that is 2 things. One, government assistance has made a dramatic difference in mitigating the effects of this recession. And 2, that certain businesses are bearing the brunt of this recession. We know that if we keep small businesses afloat through this pandemic, the economic recovery will be quicker and more robust. Now, small businesses deserve special attention to make sure that they can stay alive through and stay afloat during this pandemic. What we know is this. Now, I'm not bad-mouthing, chains or like a Starbucks, but if you spend money at, say, a Starbucks compared to a local coffee shop, more of your money is going to leave the community. When we spend and invest in our small businesses, more of the money we spend here, but that business stays in our economy, stays within our community. So that's why we have to make sure there's a revenue system and policies and procedures in place to make sure that we have creating a level playing field for those small businesses. We need to make sure that the businesses that are being most impacted by this recession and by COVID are being supported. I've talked to so many small business owners, and what they keep saying is the same thing. We need to make sure we're having clear information is coming from our government about the best ways to be safe and operate business in a safe way. We need to make sure that the businesses have those resources to have the protective equipment they need to remain open. And we need to make sure that we as citizens and people and residents of Bend are doing what we can to be safe, to lower our infection rate so that our businesses can stay open.
All right, thank you very much. Mrs. Helt, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal on that question.
My opponent keeps talking about supporting small businesses. Well, he also keeps talking about policies that tax small businesses more and hurt small businesses. He also keeps talking about bringing forward policies that bring forward taxes for gas, for getting to your job, for everyday citizens, for taxes that increase the cost of your heating, increase the cost of doing businesses for our businesses. You can't support small businesses and increase their costs. You have to be able to help with that.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Helt. Mr. Kropf, 30 seconds.
Of course I support school funding, and of course I support measures that protect this beautiful place. We cannot have a robust and growing economy if we're not growing our own talent. When we have 1 out of 5 kids not graduating from our high schools, that is unacceptable. We need to have a school system that's getting all kids ready for their future to make sure they can be the small business owners, the entrepreneurs, and the high-skilled laborers of the future. We also need to protect this beautiful place and protect our environment. We sell the Bend lifestyle as a way to attract businesses into our community. If we are not protecting this place, we are not doing enough to grow our economy.
All right, thank you very much. That's time.